Hey everybody, Nathan Ronen, CFA here, with a very unusual update that I'm posting on social media, YouTube, and the like, regarding a question that I get very often from CFA candidates when they are talking to me on the phone or when they're inquiring about my products and services, and that is my viewpoint on the stock market, the bond markets, investments, or even cryptocurrencies. To be very honest with you, I usually steer away. I really try to stay away from obviously giving my opinions on the stock market or the bond market or whether interest rates are going to go up or go down. And especially when it comes to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and others, Doge, whatever, where they're going to go, how they're going to do, should people invest in them? Because I don't want to really have anybody, come back to me and say, hey, you said this and I bought this and it went down. Don't want to be their financial advisor or their pseudo-financial advisor. So there's obviously reasons I've stayed away from it and kept my focus on CFA test prep. But once in a while, I do get these, inquiries, and, they've happened quite a bit most recently. And in light of the recent stock market crash that happened last Thursday and last Friday, April 3rd and April 4th, 2025, I'd like to sort of make a mention about Bitcoin, because right now, April 7th, Bitcoin has been reacting very differently. As you maybe all know, Bitcoin came out in the marketplace, or was created in or around November 2008, I believe it was. But again, don't quote me on the exact date, but that's not the point here. Okay. What is the point is that last week, on April 3rd and 4th, we saw a dramatic decline, somewhat of a little crash there, if you want to call it that, in the U.S. stock market as a result of what people claim to be Trump's tariff policies. Okay, Trump came out and he basically announced tariffs on a whole series of countries around the world that we have, trading agreements with, or that we, work with, or that we support. And he increased tariffs across the board. And this, whether that's right or wrong, that's not here to discuss. I have my opinions. You have your opinions. I'm not looking for, discussions on that or arguments on that. But what was very clear was that after this announcement, the stock market went into its worst days in approximately, maybe 4 years or so. But Bitcoin, okay, if you look at Bitcoin, what happened on April 3rd and April 4th, okay, Bitcoin stayed relatively stable, okay? And they ended the day, both days, just about even, around, I think at that time it was like 83,000, 82,000, what have you. Now, as I said, since, Bitcoin, became a viable investment opportunity back in November of 2008, when it first came out, Bitcoin has always been considered to be a risky asset, okay? And you say, well, why, Nathan, why is it really considered a risky asset? A lot of people, have invested in Bitcoin. A lot of people believe in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, that it is the wave of the future. What is really, the reason for it having become such a, risky type of asset? And traditionally, when people look at Bitcoin, they look at, for example, the fact that it is speculative, or maybe, like, if you want to call it, that appeals to many people, is the speculative nature of Bitcoin, okay? Because if you look at how Bitcoin has done over the years, the pattern shows significant rises and then falls, okay? And the actual cryptocurrency is maintained by a lot of participants in the marketplace who are looking to do what? Buy it and immediately get a short-term gain, and then not really look for any kind of long-term stability. So you had a lot of people, like a little while ago, Bitcoin dropped all the way down to, if you remember this, 18,000. People started flooding in. It went 20, 25, 30, back up to 60 very, very quickly. Okay. Again, people were looking for short-term gains. It went up as high as 105, 108,000, and people dropped it again. Again, a lot of speculation, and it has an appeal from a speculative standpoint. Okay. That is one of the reasons that it's been considered a risky asset, because of its very strong ups and downs. coupled with, its strong appeal from a speculative standpoint is volatility. Bitcoin has traditionally had a great deal of volatility, okay? The price of Bitcoin can experience dramatic increases, and then it can have a major decline. And it doesn't have to be over a number of days. It could be just within a few hours, okay? Bitcoin does, travel, up and down quite quickly. I mean, on the 4th and the 3rd of April, it was at around 83,000, and today, Monday, it's at 78,000. It's already had its sort of mini crash on April 7th, okay? And that's again by, and that's a lot driven by trading and really strong and very quick responses to any kind of news about it, okay? And again, that news could be contrasting very significantly from, gradual movements of other types of traditional investments like stocks and bonds, okay? So again, Bitcoin tends to have a much more higher level of volatility than traditional, investments like stocks and bonds. Okay. And then the third problem that creates or fosters Bitcoin to be looked at as a risky asset is, if you want to call it uncertainty, we can call it uncertainty in the macroeconomic environment. Okay. When there's a lot of investor confidence out there, Bitcoin tends to perform pretty well. Okay. And in fact, the ups and downs, the very strong, sudden ups and downs of Bitcoin prices are many times in line with what market participants are thinking about. In other words, what their confidence is in the overall, economy. And it correlates with, riskier asset classes. And obviously, if the market conditions are very optimistic, Bitcoin tends to rise. If the market conditions tend to be very pessimistic, Bitcoin tends to go down. So a lot of times there's, again, that sort of, if you want to call it uncertainty, from a macroeconomic standpoint. Okay? So what's the whole point that on April 3rd and April 4th of 2025, when the stock market went down dramatically, the S&P, the Dow Jones, and all that, you would expect from a historical standpoint that a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin would crash just as well with the marketplace. But it actually didn't on those 2 days. Okay? In fact, Bitcoin was acting more as a safe haven, or some kind of recluse there where people could seek safety. Okay? So basically, people started to turn to Bitcoin, even through all of that chaos in the stock market. That actually could lead to the suggestion that people are getting more comfortable, more familiar with Bitcoin, and they're beginning to look at Bitcoin in terms of its ability to be able to act as a store of value, meaning that it can be a genuine place to store value, store your money, okay? Rather than being looked at as how it has been looked at most of the time as either some kind of scam or some kind of gamble. I know many people who have turned to me over the years and said, I don't invest in cryptocurrencies. That's just a scam. Nothing's going to happen there. That's just, money wasted. People say, oh, look how much Bitcoin came down from all the way from 80 down to like 18. People don't like it. They think it's a scam or it's a major gamble. Well, this could be actually, disputing those claims. And so what I think is going to happen is over time, as more and more people tend to have this kind of perspective and seek out cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin for safety, its reputation is actually going to probably shift from being a risky asset, if you will, to a asset that is not as risky, okay? Sort of like risk on, risk off kind of thing, okay? But again, that will also lead to a decrease, in my opinion, of its overall volatility. So what you're seeing here with Bitcoin, in summary, is a relatively almost 20-year investment history that has been traditionally looked at as a very risky investment, or risky, speculative and uncertain or high volatility product, and becoming more of a asset that people do need to include in their portfolio for its diversification purposes and less of a risky asset. Again, that's what I'm thinking is going to happen in the public's eye. Now, again, you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to disagree with me. That's just my viewpoint. Okay, I can be right. I can be wrong. Only time will tell. But I do think that people are changing their perception of Bitcoin. And yes, Bitcoin will have its days where it goes up and it'll have its days where it goes down. But overall, as we just saw in the major correction, major beginning of a correction in the stock market, that over the first 2 days, Bitcoin was holding its value, and then today, on Monday, it started to, go down a little bit, and we'll see what happens. So again, this is just a little market commentary. Love to hear your viewpoints too. If you have different viewpoints, that's fine. If you agree, you can say that too in the comment section. And that's it for today.